Alright, good morning guys. This is Sayam Jha and today our topic on videos will be the difference between Indian committees and the UN committees. Now when I generally go into MUNs, I've seen this that when a first timer manner or a very beginner manner comes in, they don't generally opt for the Indian committees. They go for UNGA and bigger committees where the amount of new manners are huge. Alright. Now, what happens is after going to a few UNGAs, you get used to the UN type of committees and the UN mandate and the UN type of politics. Whereas when it comes to the Indian committees, the transition is very huge. You cannot in one day's time or in one MUN's time transit from a UN committee to an Indian committee because the leap is big. But we have certain examples in front of us which say that although the leap is big, it is not impossible. So today let me help you as an Indian committee enthusiast who has been to equal amount of UN committees. Let me help you with a few differences between the Indian committees and the UN committees so that when you go for the transition you can adapt to it. Alright, firstly the name. What happens is generally it's very popular in the Delhi circuit specifically. They call Indian committees MUN as Model Youth Parliament and MUNs as Model United Nations. But in Kolkata circuit that doesn't exist. From where I come, that is from Kolkata circuit, these two are grouped into MUNs. We don't have a culture of MYP. So let's differentiate. Firstly, we'll be discussing the mandates. Alright, the mandate of the UN committee and the MYP is very crucial. Why? When it comes to a UN committee, suppose UNGA DISEC, what is the mandate of it? It can recommend, it can affirm, reaffirm, it can urge, but it cannot act. Alright. For example, a UNGA resolution can tell you that this is wrong and this is right and nation should do this. But it cannot force on the nation, on the sovereign authority that sir you won't do this, you will have to do this. That's what is the basic problem, right? Whereas when it comes to Indian committees, a bill, an act, when a bill is passed, it is known as act. A bill is a raw draft law. An act is the past law which is in force now. So what happens is an act is completely on the person's on a person's restriction. Like it restricts you from taking any action out of the bound of law. Now, when it comes to issues like sovereignty, there are certain rights which a person, an individual has under the constitution that is also regulated by the parliament. So, a parliament can regulate your rights, its freedoms, restrictions, pass laws under which you are bound to act. You cannot go against it. Whereas in UN committees, that is not prevalent. If there's a resolution condemning you from Security Council, it may have an impact, but that doesn't have offense, that doesn't have much of a punishment except one, that is prima facie. Those are two, that is one is intervention and one is economic blockade or economic sanctions. Both of them generally due to the politics of UN fail on ground. We'll come to that later. Secondly is the laws. The international laws are completely coherently different and vague in nature. Now how? Supposingly there are laws such as international humanitarian laws which somewhat say that use of nuclear weapons is against the law, thus their possession is illegal. Now how do we connect this? There are international humanitarian treaties which say that possession of nuclear weapons, not directly, indirectly, are illegal. How it is indirectly illegal, I'll talk about that in next video. Now, what happened was the ICJ advisory opinion said that as their use is illegal, their possession is illegal as well. But that is not coherently bound for a nation to not possess a nuclear weapon. He can or she can still possess nuclear weapon. For example, right now 9 nations are possessing nuclear weapons. Whereas the Indian law or Indian regional committees law is binding in nature. Supposedly today the Indian Parliament passes an act saying that we will follow nuclear disarmament and we'll disarm all our nuclear weapons, it is bound to happen. And that has happened in past in South Africa. there was this bill which said that we'll dismantle all our nuclear weapons. That passed, that became an act, it was a law, thus the nuclear weapons were dismantled. This is the power of a domestic law. Here we cross the law, the mandate. Now come to the politics. The politics is entirely different. Although it is somewhere linked, the Indian domestic politics will affect its foreign policy. A decision taken by the political powers internally will reflect on its foreign policy. Now we have this macro and micro terms, right? Macroeconomy, microeconomy. Like macroeconomy is built of microeconomies. In the same way, the foreign policy is built of international domestic politics, and the international geopolitics is built of the domestic politics of different nations at different levels. Thus, the politics of UN may or may not be influenced by one nation's domestic policies, but when it comes to the domestic policies and politics of all the nations, it does affect the politics of international relations. The most crucial part for a manner, the paperwork. Now, the paperwork is something which is the final conclusive document of a committee or of a agency which says that it has taken this action. Now, what happens in a UN committee is that if there's a resolution, it doesn't have that binding effect, right? A resolution at the end of the day by UNGA cannot be binding in nature, but a paperwork such as an act, act is the past law, the draft law is the bill, resolution, white paper, they have certain amount of value, and that value is suprema facie. After constitution, the IPC, CRPC, then the bills, they three run in coherence with each others. The laws are made in accordance to the constitution, but the parliament at the same time has the power to amend the constitution. So what do we learn is that the paperwork of an Indian committee will have effect on your sovereignty, on your authority, and will restrict you at some point of time, whereas a UN resolution will not restrict a nation. So these are the basic differences between MUN and MYP. At the end of the day, the UN committees are not that dynamic in nature. Whereas if you visit a Lok Sabha or a Rajya Sabha as a delegate, I'll tell you that if they follow the provisional rules of procedure, if they tell you everything correctly, then I'll tell you law commissions, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, ad hoc committees, they are way more dynamic in nature, and they have way more capabilities, powers and jurisdiction than a UN committee. That's that for today. Thank you for watching.